La diffusion vient de démarrer. Tous les participants sont en mode écoute seule.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to greet you and to welcome you to the 6th National Report Technical Webinar Series offered by the UN Development Programme, the UN Environment, and the Convention on Biological Diversity. My name is Marion Marigot, and I am the UNDP Technical Specialist for the 6NR project. We are grateful for your participation in this webinar on biodiversity indicators. I want to warmly welcome and thank our colleague from the Biodiversity Indicator Partnership, the BIP, Mike Gill and Katherine Despot-Belmonte, who will be our speaker today. Mike Gill is the director of NatureServe's Biodiversity Indicator Program and holds an elected position as a co-chair of the Group on Earth Observation, Biodiversity Observation Network, also called the GeoBON. His work involves leading the design and implementation of a global biodiversity observation system and producing policy-relevant outputs and tools in the form of biodiversity indicators, predictive models, and visualization. Katherine Despot-Belmonte is a program officer at the UN Environment World Conservation Monitoring Center, UNEP WCMC, and a member of the Biodiversity Indicator Partnership Secretariat. She has led the development of useful resources now available on the BIP website to support indicators development and national use of global indicators. Welcome to both of you, and thank you for your time. So before we begin, I'd like to share with you some rules and dynamics for this webinar session. Microphone will be muted during the presentations. That reduces interferences and facilitates the communication. The session will last an hour. After a presentation from Mike and Katherine, we will open the floor for questions and remarks. If you think of a question while the presentation is in progress, you can use the control panel and write it. When the Q&A session comes, I will read your question to our speakers so they can answer it. If you want to speak and the connection allows it, we will open your microphones during the Q&A session. To let us know that you'd like to speak, you can simply raise your hand by clicking on the hand button in the control panel. This session is being recorded, and we will upload the recording on the 6NR Technical Webinar Series YouTube channel. We will also share the presentation on the NBSAP forum. For information, the presentation of today's webinar will be given in English, pero el mismo seminario se realizará en español en 3 horas a las 11 de la mañana, hora de Nueva York. Et le même webinaire aura lieu en français le jeudi 7 février à 8 heures du matin, heure de New York. And now I will transfer the webinar floor to Mike and Katherine. Welcome to both of you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Marion. I'll start the presentation with some useful resources on the BIP, and then Mike will continue showcasing the Biodiversity Dashboard, which is a platform that visualizes the indicators that are available from the BIP. So first of all, we want to make this webinar as useful as possible. We know that most countries are well progressed on their 6 national reports. So the information that we're going to provide today, we're hoping that contributes to some of the storylines that you're already building around progress towards IET targets. So we're going to show a little bit of resources that are available on the BIP website to help you choose on what's available on the BIP, what indicators are available for national use, or where you can get some data for your reporting needs, and also visualizing these indicators. And as I mentioned, Mike will take over that part of the webinar. So let me start. Most of you might know about the Biodiversity Indicators Partnership. We've had previous webinars explaining what the partnership is, but I'll give you just a quick reminder. So the Biodiversity Indicators Partnership has a CBD mandate to promote the development and delivery of indicators at the global, regional, and national levels. The purpose is to provide indicators that can help track and monitor progress towards these global targets at the global and national level. We have over 60 organizations working together, producing and promoting the use of indicators. And at the moment, we have over 60 indicators that are part of the partnership. The Secretariat is based at UNEP WCMC, based in Cambridge. And you see the logos, these are some of the members of the partnership. And I'll have a go at provide maybe showcasing the website. Let me see if this works. Great. I think it's better if I show you the website as it is. So basically, the website has been designed in a way that it's easy to find indicators depending on specific themes. So one of the ways that, if you know the name of an indicator, you can search for it quickly. But if you want to focus on specific Aichi targets, you can click on one of them, for example, on the one for marine and fisheries, and you get a useful list of indicators that this is a primary indicator, so it's super relevant for this specific target. And you also have secondary indicators that they are not core, but they could provide relevant information. You can also search for indicators for your sustainable development goals. So again, if you click, for example, on the one on climate action, it gives you an indicator that is relevant for this purpose. Indicators brought together by the BIP also promote and support other biodiversity-related conventions, for example, CITES, the Convention on Migratory Species, UNCCD, and also provide support to IPES in the global and regional assessments. You can also search for indicators depending on the theme that you're interested in. So for example, if you're interested in marine and freshwater habitats, you have a list of useful indicators that can provide some information on specific assessments or reports. And what we have recently developed is this tab, that it's what we're going to be showcasing today, is a national indicators tab that allows you to browse for global indicators that have data available for your specific country. So for example, if you want to find your, if you're based in Latin America and you want to find what global indicators do have data available to support my 6 national reports, that's your key question. Then, for example, Bolivia, I'm from Bolivia, I want to find which indicators can provide me with some information that might be useful for my 6 national reports. So here at the country level, you can see that there are a number of indicators that do have data available for my country. So if I want to explore a little bit more of this information, for example, I'm interested in seeing progress towards Aichi Target 4. I have a look at the ecological footprint indicator. You see that there's a brief description of what the indicator is telling us, that the indicator is a core indicator to monitor progress towards Target 4 of the Aichi targets. Also, on the key indicator facts, we see that this indicator is available, it's applicable for national use. Also, that the data that underlies this indicator is freely available. So when you click here, it takes you to the external website for the indicator provider, who's the Global Footprint Network, and it provides you the link to the data. Indicators from the BIP are regularly updated, so you can see the date of the last update there. And very important, the contact point. So if you have questions about developing this indicator or making use of some of this data for your 6 national reports, we have a contact point who's the person who is in charge of looking after this indicator from the organization, and all BIP partners are very keen on making their indicators useful. So if you want to find out more information about how this indicator applies at the national level, you click on Find Out More. And this description gives you an idea of how you can produce this indicator nationally, how you can make use of it. There are useful examples of how the countries have used it at the national level. And also we provide resources that can provide more information about how to make use of this indicator. We've also provide links to the data. And as I explained already, the data is provided on an external website. So here we provide a little bit of signposting of how to find information that would be relevant data that is available for your specific countries. That's the main changes that we've done on the website. So all the indicators that are available on the BIP have this section on national use with further information of how you can apply this indicator at the country level. And a couple of more pages that might be useful in terms of supporting your 6 national reports is the Indicator Development tab, which provides useful information on how to develop some of these indicators at the national level, including guidance and reports. We also have the links to data here for different regions, and within those regions, different countries. And also useful is the resource section. So there's a lot of publications that we've done, not only in English. Unfortunately, the website at the moment is only written in English, but there are lots of resources that are available that are written in different languages as well. Those are the key resources that I wanted to showcase. Now, Mike will give you an overview of the dashboard, and afterwards we can explore more if there are specific questions from countries. So the floor is yours, Mike.
Great, thanks, Katherine. So I think people can hear me. So what I'm going to do is first just show you all a few slides, and then I'll go into a live demonstration of the dashboard component of the Biodiversity Indicators Partnership website. So last year, we began a collaboration, we being NatureServe, with UN Environment's World Conservation Monitoring Center and the Biodiversity Indicators Partnership that Katherine just told you about. And the reason that NatureServe linked up with these two organizations is that NatureServe is an Americas-wide science-based non-governmental conservation organization. So we operate 80 different biodiversity centers in South, Central, and North America. And through the years, NatureServe's developed a lot of different conservation software planning tools, including data visualization platforms, which we call the dashboard. And so last year, through discussions between the UN Environment's WCMC and NatureServe, we realized that there was an opportunity to build on the great work and the strengths of the Biodiversity Indicators Partnership and all of those indicator providers, and apply the dashboard data visualization platform to really bring to life a lot of these indicators and make them easy for people to access in flexible ways. So first off, I'm sure all of you know more than anyone that there's, at the national level, there's just an incredible reporting burden that countries face with regard to different domestic requirements to track targets or environmental policy, but also with regard to all the different biodiversity related conventions that have been signed. The Convention on Biological Diversity is just one of many. There's Convention on Migratory Species, the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, and on it goes. And all of those conventions come with their own targets and therefore their own reporting requirements. And of course, to track a target, you need indicators. You need time series data to really say something about whether at the national scale or the regional or the global scale, you're either moving towards or away from a target. So we've seen this incredible increase in the demand for time series indicators, and there's been a lot of great work, especially through the partnership of the BIP, to really increase the supply of indicators, especially around the ACHI targets. But there remains a number of different barriers in their use and access. And some of that's just as simple as limited access. So even knowing who to talk to or where to go to access some of the available indicators that are developed by different organizations, lack of information on how to use those indicators, and also a lack of ability to visualize those indicators at a national scale. So we have a lot of different indicators, some of which up until recently were hard to sort of disaggregate down to a national scale. So with that in mind, the main purpose of this BIP dashboard is really focused on streamlining national reporting for the multilateral environmental agreements. And of course, right now, as mentioned at the beginning of the call, many countries are still working on their 6 national reports to the Convention on Biological Diversity. So this tool is really there to help those countries to access some of the latest information and evidence-based information and indicators to pull into their reports. Now, as we developed this platform and interacted with what we called our user panel, there was a number of other applications that they identified that they would use the dashboard for, such as identifying key conservation issues and prioritizing their own conservation efforts, being able to answer questions around the impacts of conservation policy, so doing counterfactual analysis, so what would have happened to the biodiversity in a particular region if we didn't have these policies in place, establish current and historical baselines, which we can measure targets against, and also because of some of the indicators as part of the BIP, some of them can actually be disaggregated at subnational or basin levels. And so these countries that we worked with identified the opportunity to use them to inform subnational planning and assessment. And finally, we're working on an idea that came out of the last Conference of the Parties, 14th Conference of the Parties of the CBD in Egypt, to develop or transform this dashboard into a global platform for tracking the new post-2020 targets when they're released and adopted in October of 2020. So just quickly on how we developed this, what we wanted to do was, we didn't want to do the usual thing where you build a software platform and then you go and tell everybody how wonderful it is and try and convince them to use this. What we thought we would do is shortcut the process by actually asking the parties to the convention what they wanted and what would be useful. And then through that interactive process, we would design a platform that worked for them. So this BIP dashboard is really something that was designed by the parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity for the parties. So what we did was we took the original NatureServe dashboard, which you can see the link here, and you're welcome to play around with that. And we customized or redesigned it with the specific purpose of working and visualizing the biodiversity indicators from the BIP. And we established a user panel of national regional representatives from Egypt, Uganda, China, a number of nations in Southeast Asia and the South Pacific, and Peru and Kyrgyzstan. And we also conducted additional interviews with representatives in South America, Colombia, and in the Arctic Council. And through that sort of back and forth process over a 4-month period, we developed wireframes, which we then tested with the panel, and they told us how to change them and what worked and what didn't. And we ended up with the dashboard, which I'll present in a minute. And we hired some design consultants called Green Info Network to help with the process in terms of the user experience and user interface. So in summary, when we interacted with our multi-user panel over a 4-month period, I just wanted to highlight some key points that were raised that we designed the dashboard around this advice. So first off, the main thing was that a lot of platforms start by showing a global view of data. But what our panelists said is that they wanted the opportunity to jump straight to their country first, not waste time, and have the ability to look at their neighbors secondly. And also to search for indicators first by different themes, such as species or policy and conservation issues or forest cover, things like that. Then by the Aichi biodiversity targets, and then by the Sustainable Development Goals. Of course, many users have slow internet, so they didn't want a really graphic-rich, heavy platform to load. They wanted to have the methodology close at hand so that they were able to determine themselves whether this was an indicator that they felt would suit their purposes. And they also wanted, in many cases, to be able to download the data so that they could create their own charts and trends. And also, we heard that they wanted to access the most important widely used things up front. And as you dive further down into the dashboard, you get into the more complicated, yes, widely used things later. And finally, avoid journeys to no results. So I will just jump over to the website now. But as mentioned earlier, Katherine showed that the BIP dashboard is found right on the BIP website. If you click on the top right corner of the BIP website, you'll get to it. So let me just jump into this. So when you click on the website, you end up on this very simple front-end homepage, again, because we wanted to focus on making it easy and quick to load. And so you can search for your country or any country of interest, either by typing it in. So say you wanted to do Kazakhstan, you can jump right to it, and it's in teletype, so it jumps and assumes what you're going to focus on. You can also click on different regions as you go. And every country in the world is in here. So let's start with Kazakhstan. So we'll just jump to this. And what you come up with for Kazakhstan is a list of different themes which you can explore. So you can look at species and find indicators under those themes, policy and conservation actions, terrestrial habitats, and so on and so forth. And so for each indicator, they're tagged so that you can see what they relate to. So of course, the red list index relates to Aichi Biodiversity Target 12. It's also relevant to these different Sustainable Development Goals, which you can mouse over. And also you can learn more about these different multilateral environmental agreements, which the red list index has some relevance to. So then if you wanted to actually, you decided that the red list index was an important indicator to visualize and report on for your country level, you just simply click on it. And what it does is it generates a visualization of that indicator in both chart form here, as well as map form showing a symbology. And these are standard color symbologies that depict the rate of change. Excuse me. So first off, looking at the chart here, you can see that the red list index trend line for Kazakhstan, and it's also depicted here on the map using these color symbologies, and you can see how your country compares to the region as a whole, and you can zoom in or zoom out, so you can actually zoom up to the global level or zoom right in if you want. And for all of these different visualizations, you can download them. So you can download the chart image. So if I click on this chart, it will open up a PNG file, which is a graphic file, which you can then save and download and put in your report if you want. And we always encourage people, if they do this, to retain the attribution or the data source tag, because what we want to do is make sure that we give credit to the data providers that provided these indicators. So in this case, IUCN and BirdLife International. You can also download the trend chart as a PDF. Just waiting for that to pull up. So that's the PDF, same thing, just different format. And you can also, if you want to create your own chart, you can download the data points itself as a Excel CSV file. And some of our users do this. They want to use their own chart graphics, and so we allow this to happen. And the other option that you have is you can also download the map view. So whatever you see in this panel, whether you zoom in or out, you can download that. So you just simply click on the download map view, and that will generate a file which shows that. And again, you can put that into your own report. So the other thing worth pointing out is I mentioned at the beginning that our user panel said keep methodology close at hand. So right on the panel, you can jump to a metadata link. So show, hide, description of indicators. So you just simply click on that, and this will give you a very short summary of what this indicator is and what it means and what it's trying to tell you. And if you want more information, you can jump back to the BIP website, to the BIP indicator fact sheets, which gives you much richer detail around the data sources and the organizations behind the indicator. What does the indicator and the data layers mean? What are the trends telling you? What was the methodology behind the indicator? What are some limitations and caveats to using that indicator, and where you can get more information? So again, we wanted to try and make it all the methodology as easily available as possible. You can also just jump quickly to the global map, and you can explore Kazakhstan's Red List Index in relation to all these other different countries. So maybe I'll just show one or two more examples. We'll go to another country. So we did Africa. Why don't we do Colombia? So we'll just jump to Colombia. And oh, and one thing I should mention before I forget, when you click Colombia, so we'll just go to, I'll show you this way. If you go to South America, these numbers to the right of each country tell you how many indicators are currently available for that particular country. So you can see here 10 different indicators from the BIP partnership that are available. So if you click on Colombia, you can again explore different indicators at different levels from different themes. So maybe we can pick a different theme. So let's try the Protected Area Representativeness Index, which is quite relevant, of course, to Target 11. So again, when you click on this one, you get, again, the chart, the trend line, and I have to reload that one. Sometimes the symbology doesn't work, but so you can see the colors here. And so you can see that the Protected Area Representativeness Index, so how well protected area networks in Colombia are representing the different ecosystems, you can see that there's a steady improvement as more protected areas have been established. So you can see a moderately increasing trend in Colombia. Now, what's interesting about this indicator is you can actually disaggregate the indicator to subnational scales. So if you click on, for any of the indicators that you can do this, you'll see a Show Basin button, which you can click on, and then you can actually pick a different sub-basin in the country. So I can pick one along the coast here in the Gulf of the Panama coast, and you can visualize the actual trend lines for protected area representativeness along this particular slice of Colombia. And again, you can download the chart image, the chart PDF, the data itself, or download the map view. So again, what we're trying to do is just make it really, really quick and easy and flexible for people to access all these great indicators that are part of the BIP partnership and make them available so that you can quickly and easily put them into your own 6 national reports or other reporting processes as you see fit. And it's worth mentioning that we're already seeing some strong evidence of active use of the BIP dashboard for the 6 national reports, which is really, really encouraging. So maybe we'll just do one more example just so we can spend more time on questions and discussion. And again, we really love feedback as well on this. So I've just jumped to Mozambique. Let's show you a marine indicator. So we'll pick the Ocean Health Index. Again, they're mapped to relevant targets, so target 11 of the ACHI and the various Sustainable Development Goals. So on this marine indicator, you can see the trends over time along the coastline of Mozambique, and so it's just taking a while to load. I think it's because I'm sharing my screen, so my data is a little bit slower. So you can see that the Ocean Health Index has improved somewhat along the Mozambique coastline over time, and you can see that this is also symbolized with this increasing color here. One thing to also mention that with every single indicator, we can show you the annual trend change. So this is the annual change, but you can also just look at the most recent measurement for that particular index. So for this one, it's 2016. And so what then happens, excuse me, is the trend line, the trend chart stays the same, but the map will then symbolize or show you its relative rank or value compared to other, in this case, economic exclusive marine zones. So you can see that the Ocean Health Index along Mozambique is relatively high. So those are just a few examples. Just going back to the slide deck, just will end with a few final points before we go into discussion. So the BIP dashboard, we started building it last June. We've made great progress with adding a number of different indicators on it. We're working with Katherine and WCMC and the BIP Secretariat and the BIP partners to add more indicators as we go. And as mentioned at the beginning of the call or the webinar, there's a large number of partners in the BIP partnership representing over 60 indicators. And there's always more indicators being added. So indicators that come into the BIP have to meet a certain standard around methodology, published methodology, data standards. And if they meet that, then they get reviewed and approved through the BIP steering committee, and more are added. And there's some really interesting indicators that are up for consideration over the coming month. And if those are accepted, we will work with those partners to add them to the BIP dashboard. We're also working with the Secretariat of the CBD to offer assistance to countries. And we again thank very much Marian and Diego and all of their colleagues at UNDP for helping getting us on this webinar around the 6 national reports. And if you go to the CBD Secretariat website, which is cbd.int, and you go to the national reports section, you can find on there more background information on the BIP dashboard. So you can find fact sheets in the various UN languages that explain more what the BIP dashboard is. And you can also find an instruction brochure in the UN languages that explain how to actually use the BIP dashboard. And finally, we're considering adding some additional features such as country summary PDFs. So with this, you would click on a button and it would produce a summary for your country of all the indicators that are available in a basically a short summarized PDF document. I'm actually interested in any feedback on whether you would find that useful or not. And as mentioned, we're exploring with different partners the idea of building a post-2020 target trackers. So we'd like to transform this dashboard into one that can help track the new targets that come out post-2020 after the Aichi biodiversity targets expire. So that's just a quick short demo of the BIP dashboard itself. We, of course, welcome any and all questions and comments and feedback and criticism. And you can please note down our emails for Katherine and I. We're happy to help you if you have any questions, either on the BIP website and the BIP resources that are available or the BIP dashboard. Please get a hold of us. So with that, I'll pass it back to Marian.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike. And thanks, Katherine, also for that very insightful presentation, very informative. So let's start with the Q&A session. As I was saying, I invite all the participants to, if they can, raise their hand to participate directly in the Q&A session, and we will open your microphone. And if you cannot speak in your microphone, then you're welcome to also type your question and I'll read it out loud. So we have received actually a couple of questions during your presentation. And the first one is from Angela Devia, who's asking how to send the data or connect with your web services.
Sorry, what was the question again, Marian?
How to send the data or connect with your web services. So pretty much for the countries to share data or indicators?
Okay, so that's not a function that we have there at the moment, but that's a really good point because that's something that we would like to implement in the future, hopefully, especially in the BIP dashboard, where countries can make use of their own data. The data that is available at the moment, both on the BIP website and the BIP dashboard, have been collected by these organizations. So the indicator providers have been collecting data for long periods of time for their own indicators. Some of this information is data that has been aggregated from the national level. And some of the data or the underlying data sets can be from the indicator can be disaggregated so that countries can use it. But at this stage, we don't have that option for countries to send this data. But definitely, that's something that we're interested in the future. That's a gap that needs to be filled.
And maybe
any comments?
Yeah, just to add to that, and that is great to hear that question come through, because obviously there's some interest perhaps in having that function. So we are talking to a few countries that are interested in working with us to develop customized national dashboards where they could actually, through web service, load and visualize their own data. Through that sort of pilot or prototype, that and as we learned from that, we could then see whether it was feasible and made sense to sort of apply it in a widespread function through the BIP dashboard itself. So thanks very much for that question.
Thank you. And we do have another question from Asuko Okon, and you raised your hand, Asuko, so I'm going to open your microphone. Let's see if we can hear you. Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon from here, from Nigeria.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Okay. My question is just the difference between this BIP dashboard and the UN lab. Is there any difference? Are they also compatible in terms of working with the data?
That's
sure,
a great question.
And
Mike, that's for you, I think.
Yeah, that's another wonderful question. So yeah, that's a great question, and it's one that we are working hard to make sure that that users of the UN Biodiversity Lab and the BIP dashboard understand how they can work together, but also how they're different. So we've been working very closely with the UNDP and UNEP teams that, and that's of course includes Marian and Diego on this call, behind the UN Biodiversity Lab. So what we tend to say in terms of how we describe them is that they have something in common, and what they have in common is that they're both trying to improve the capacity to access data for things like the 6 national reports. Now, the UN Biodiversity Lab is an excellent spatial data platform, and so it's focusing on spatial data to help with that reporting and also conservation planning. So it's really focused on the where of biodiversity. Where are the important resources? Where are the pressures? How do we actually respond to those? And how can we use that information to track progress towards the ACHI targets? The BIP dashboard is focused more on the how of biodiversity. So how is biodiversity doing? Are we moving away or towards the targets? How is our policy doing? Are we improving our policy outputs, such as adding protected areas? So there is a difference in that the BIP dashboard is focused more on time series data, and the UN Biodiversity Lab is focused on spatial data. Where there might be confusion is that with the BIP dashboard, we also, of course, spatially visualize the time series data. Maybe the last thing to point out is that in the coming week, we will have cross links between those two platforms. So when you go on the BIP dashboard, probably by the end of this week, you'll see a link on the front page that will take you directly to the UN Biodiversity Lab. If you're in, it will say something around where you can access the best available spatial data for your national reports, and vice versa. the UN Biodiversity Lab will have a link to the BIP dashboard. So I hope that helps answer or clarify the question.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And
Thank
if I
you.
may,
Thank you very much.
If I may add to this response, actually, it's the combination of the two tools is extremely powerful, because when you do your assessment regarding biodiversity conservation, you now can answer the where and how. And so if you use those tools, you know, in combination, and you put this in a report that will be supporting your assessment when you talk to decision makers, then you pretty much highlight the issue, but also find the solution on how to improve it. And so combining those two tools for us is absolutely critical for the 6NR, but also for any, you know, upcoming report, and also for the implementation of your NBSAP. So as Mike just said, we invite you all to keep an eye on both platforms to see how they will be more linked and correlated in the future. But we certainly invite you to explore both of them and see how you can link them on maybe some specific Aichi biodiversity targets for the future. So thank you so much, Asuquo. I'm gonna.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
That's
you.
wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah.
Thanks for attending the webinar. I'm gonna close your microphone, but if you have another question, do not hesitate. So we have received 2 more questions. One is from Brian, asking, apart from downloading the map view, can one download shape files and folder worked on in a GIS software?
So the short answer is no, not yet. So yeah, right now we just allow the map view function comes up as a graphic file. And I know enough to be dangerous when it comes to GIS technical questions, but I believe that this is something that is quite feasible. I don't know if, Katherine, if you have a more informed answer than I do on that, but if not, what I will do is take that back to our development team and make that a consideration, because I assume based on that question being asked that there would be an interest in being able to download it as a shapefile.
Yeah, I think you're right, Mike. We don't have that option available yet. Definitely, we need to get back to the technical team and see if there are plans to implement this in the future, but not at this stage. Basically, what we wanted to provide was something that was easily available, especially to support the 6 national reports. As Mike already mentioned, we're thinking about adding more indicators, developing other tools within the dashboards, and this is really useful feedback that we'll take on board. Thank you.
Thanks for that question. To be continued. We have Vijay Kesari that is raising his hand. So Vijay, I'm gonna open your microphone, and can you hear me? Vijay, can you speak?
Excuse me. Hello.
Oh, hi.
Vijay is not on the line. Yeah, I'm Shalu here.
Hi, okay, because it's under another name. Perfect.
Yeah. Vijay is not here, so he's from the UNDP.
Perfect.
And
So
I'm the consultant for the 6 national report.
fantastic. Would you like to ask your question still?
Yeah, I have a few questions with Mike. Since we are looking at Nepalese data on UN Biodiversity Lab, we downloaded much of the data from and maps from the UN Biodiversity Lab. So if is it similar to the NatureServe's data on the dashboard, or do they have the similar kind of data which is similar to the UN Biodiversity, or is it different than the maps and figures which is in the UN Biodiversity Lab? Number one. Number two is, to what extent have the data for Nepal being collected and analyzed? And if so, which organization is the NatureServe in Nepal collaborating for the data system? Okay, that's all from my side.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the questions. So the first one is, and it's great to hear that Nepal is actively using the UN Biodiversity Lab and downloading the spatial data layers for their 6 national report. And again, there is some similarities between the UN Biodiversity Lab and the BIP dashboard. both in terms of we're trying to serve the six national reporting process. The other similarity is that a lot of the data that you find in the UN Biodiversity Lab and the BIP Dashboard is coming from the same sources, but the data itself is somewhat different in two ways. One is that the data that you find on the BIP Dashboard is focused solely on time series trends. So it's focused more on those particular trends over time, although there is some information in the UN Biodiversity Lab that also includes that. The other thing is that the BIP Dashboard focuses on all the different ACHI targets and includes data from different biodiversity indicators partners. So what you'll find is that, and as Marion so eloquently said, using both platforms will give you sort of the best complete coverage for your six national report, where you can access those best spatial data layers from the UN Biodiversity Lab and the time series trend data from the BIP Dashboard. On the second question, so NatureServe is not working directly with anyone in Nepal. And the way it works is that we've been working with the partners in the BIP that produce these indicators that have data that can be disaggregated to the national or country level, including Nepal. So I can't remember how many indicators have data for Nepal, but I'm willing to bet it's around 10. And so we have not worked directly with any agencies in Nepal to visualize their own national or subnational data holdings. We simply, at this point, make available global data sets, many of which actually come from national data sources that you can then visualize at your national level and download. But as mentioned earlier with the other question around web services and national data, we are interested in exploring whether there would be interest and a demand to allow countries to upload through web services their own national data sets on time series trends. But that's to come.
Okay, thank you so much.
Marion, maybe it'd be useful to share my screen. I quickly searched Nepal on the dashboard, and I can see that there are a number of indicators that are relevant for your 6 national reports. So you can see that there's information from the Red List Index. There's data available for, well, indicators related to protected areas, the Biodiversity Intactness Index. And what I think is really useful is, depending on where the gaps or where do you want to strengthen the information on your 6 national reports, you can perhaps have a quick look at those AICHI targets that you're interested in providing more information on, and then selecting the indicator and finding out more information specifically for Nepal. But as you can see, there are different themes in terms of agriculture and terrestrial habitats, sustainable use of resources, a number of indicators that might be useful for your 6 national report. So I think just have a look and you'll see that the information that is provided, so the indicators, that is time series data, is slightly different than some of the data layers available on the UN Biodiversity Lab. So it'd be great if you can make use of both platforms.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. I'm gonna close your microphone. If you have any other question, please feel free to raise your hand again. And in the meantime, we had Sophia that asked us how to use the global data to apply with national targets, and with what confidence level to use the web portal. So there are actually 2 questions: how to use the global data to apply with national targets first, and what's the level of confidence that we can attribute actually to this web portal. And I'm seeing here the level of confidence will actually be, because in the national reporting there is a section asking for the national the level of confidence in their assessment.
Yeah, Okay, I'll take a stab at answering that, and then of course Katherine jump in as well.
Yeah.
So how to use the global data at the national level? Well, it's to track the national targets. What we want to do here is make as much of this global data available for use. And as Katherine just said, we are already seeing countries sort of pick and choose the indicators that they may want to access either through the BIP website or the BIP dashboard to sort of round out their national reports. So a combination of using their own national data sets and accessing some of these global indicators. And all we can do is provide guidance on their fit for purpose use. So through the BIP indicator fact sheets and the metadata links, we try and give as much information as possible on the methodology behind the indicator and what is the most appropriate way to use it. But we don't, there's so many hundreds of different use cases that it's impossible for us to, through a web system, sort of cover all potential uses. So we really leave it up to the user to make those final decisions. It's worth pointing out that many of these quote unquote global indicators or global data sets, many of them actually come from data derived at the national level. So a lot of this data has actually been collected and QA/QC'd and validated at the national level. On the second question around attributing some confidence around what these indicators are saying at the national level, we don't actually have a means by which you can calculate that statistically at this point. Again, I think it's really up to the user to decide for themselves whether the information that's being visualized at their national level makes sense. And I can give maybe an example. So for instance, China's 6th National Report, it includes, I think, up to 62 national indicators. So a really rich source of data coming from the country itself to say how China is making progress on its own national targets. And then what they did was they selected several indicators from the BIP dashboard that they felt they had confidence in, accurately depicted what was happening in China, and sort of rounded out the story in terms of their own national report. And we see evidence of this already, that countries are picking and choosing. It's very difficult for us to go beyond sort of presenting and allowing access to the indicators in a flexible way and providing the methodology and guidance on how to use them. But we stop short of being able to say sort of carte blanche, you know, in every case this indicator makes sense for your country. It's really up to the user to make that final decision.
And to add to that, Mike, just a reminder that we do make an effort to provide as much information as possible on the methodology of an indicator. For example, in the example of Nepal, having a look at the Red List Index. And if a user wants to find out more information about the Red List Index, they can find methodology here, which includes the limitations on, first of all, information on how this indicator was developed, the data that was used, what it represents, what is this indicator telling us, but it also gives you the limitations and caveats for using this indicator. And if users want to find even more information at the national level, this takes you back to the indicator fact sheet. So you have a look at how to apply this for national use, and then you'll get more information on how this can be produced nationally, and some examples of how countries have applied this indicator and made use of the data. As well as the contact person to support or answer some of the questions that we couldn't answer today. I hope that helps and gives you a little bit more of an idea of how you can make, and your country can make their own assessment of making use of these indicators and if they are a good fit.
Thanks, Katherine. Thank you. I do think it helps. And well, Sophia, if you do have any other questions, feel free to send it to us to continue the conversation. I'm looking at the time right now, and I think we have time for maybe one more question. And actually, Sharik has sent us a question. I'm going to read it. It's a bit long, explaining. Sharik is working with us and has been working with us for developing the Afghanistan 6NR. So let me read his question. In Afghanistan, we struggle with not having access to authentic time series data. I would like to know how these time series data for Afghanistan, for example, where the 14% of the annual mean percentage of each KBA covered by protected areas comes from. Having asked this BIP dashboard is excellent, and I will use the data here for the 6NR. So thank you a lot, Sharik, for always being here in the webinars and always participating. I give the microphone maybe to Mike and Katherine for this last question.
Great, thank you for the question. So another excellent one. So with the indicator, the protected area coverage of key biodiversity areas, this is an indicator that comes from both IUCN BirdLife International, who is responsible for maintaining the key biodiversity area data set. Also includes data from WCMC's World Database of Protected Areas. So the way it works is that the KBA, or key biodiversity area data, is calculated and derived using a set of criteria and standards that's consistent around the world for identifying areas that are considered to meet the criteria of being a key biodiversity area. And so those have been mapped, and the spatial data is maintained by BirdLife International. And then that is overlaid with data from the World Database of Protected Areas, which is a fabulous platform developed and maintained by the World Conservation Monitoring Center. And they track protected area coverage and various different protected area metrics coming from the national government's data. And so the protected area coverage of KBA simply blends those two data sources together to look at, over time, how much of a key biodiversity area is covered by a formal protected area. So that's how it's calculated. The one thing that's worth noting is that the World Database of Protected Areas is always reliant on the national government sending in their latest updated numbers around the protected area coverage. So sometimes there's a little bit of a time lag there because it can only be updated once those numbers are submitted. I don't know, Katherine, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's a really good summary. And if you want to find, again, more information about the indicator, this is provided on the metadata and also on the indicator fact sheet.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I know we have a few more questions, but speakers are on a very tight schedule today, very busy. So what I would encourage you to do is to send your questions and remarks and feedback, because I know Katherine and Mike would like to get your feedback on this platform. Send your feedback to the email address that were shared in Mike's ends of the presentation. And so you can share with them anything that you would like, maybe any questions or any remarks, because we actually need to conclude the webinar for now. Mike, yeah, you had something to say?
Well, I was just saying, Marion, I'm happy. I don't know about your schedule, but if I'm happy to stay on. I know Katherine is really on a tight schedule right now, but if there's any more questions, I could try and answer them.
Perfect. Katherine, would that work for you? And then we'll, of course, communicate you the questions if there's any for you. And I know you have to go. But I think it would be great if Mike can stay on the line for a bit.
Perfect. Yeah, no problem. It was a pleasure, and I hope the information was useful.
It was very useful. Thank you, Katherine.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. So I think that we have a few more questions. Actually, I see that James Williams is raising his hand. Hi, James. Pleasure to be in touch again. I'm activating your microphone. You can speak.
Thank you very much indeed, Marion. Good afternoon, everyone. It's afternoon in the UK. Mike, a question, if I may, about linkages between national views of data and regional views. it would be quite useful, I think, to be able to put national information into a regional context sometimes. So, for example, I'm just picking up on, for example, the Red List Index. So the question really is around the opportunity to do that, and I appreciate that that adds a further level of complexity to the work that you're doing by actually, in some cases, what region are we talking about? But to be able to say, I want to see what my data look like in the context of a broader geographic scale could, I think, be quite helpful. Is there any plans to do that?
Yeah, thanks, James, for that question. So we actually have done that sort of behind the scenes, but we haven't sort of turned on the button, so to speak. But you alluded to the fact that it's always a question of sort of how you define the regional scale, and of course, every user might have a different definition or need for that. So what we've done is we have calculated time series values for the indicators based on the Sustainable Development Goal regional depictions. So the SDGs have actually delineated the world into a number of different regions, as well as using the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity Ecosystem Services regional depictions. So we've done that. We haven't turned it on. The reason why we didn't yet was that in our interactions with our user panel, they felt that it was too sort of context specific for them to find it of much use. But I think what I'm hearing from you, James, is that you actually would find this useful. And if you have any more follow-up advice for me by email, I would very much appreciate that.
Well, maybe we should chat by email, Mike. But I mean, I think one of the things that I think is quite useful with some of these indicators is, yes, there's a value, but what does that value mean? And just to take UK in an EU context, for example, or in a broader pan-European context, some of those things I think would be more useful than putting them into a global context, because clearly we're a highly developed country and we have a degraded ecosystem relative to somewhere that will have had much less development. Mm-hmm. But in a European context, that's perhaps a better comparator.
That's right. And the other thing I should mention that we're planning to do, if we can sort of confirm that this will be useful, is add in a comparison feature. So what you'd be able to do is generate a chart. Say for the UK, you want to generate the chart for the Red List Index. You could then click on a drop-down list for other countries, or maybe by regions, as you say the EU, and you can then generate the Red List Index line on the same chart, so that you can compare the UK to, say, the EU or to Netherlands or whatever. We haven't done that yet, just simply because we had to sort of prioritize or triage what to put on first. And what we've found was, in our panel feedback, we had some panelists express interest in having that, but they also said that they would never ever actually put that in a report, just simply due to sensitivities around.
I can see that would be the case, and I could also see that we might well not necessarily put everything into a report, but I think there is the opportunity that this sort of big data gives to do some exploratory data analysis is, I think, quite important.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, that's really helpful. I appreciate that. Yeah, so even though it might not go in a report, it still could be a widely used function. So I'll definitely take that back to the team as consideration on our sort of to-do list.
The other one I think that I'd just like to pick up on, if I may, is the question that was being asked earlier with respect to national data. I mean, as you are aware, we've got a lot of indicators within the United Kingdom that are at a more detailed level than is possible to do with some of the global ones, purely and simply because as you get down to a more detailed geographical scale, you're able to do things that you aren't perhaps able to do at a global or regional level. And I would be quite interested to see how this could complement There was a bit on the BIP website about national indicator initiatives. I haven't checked whether or not that's still there or been removed, but I think seeing more detail of what other countries are doing with their indicator sets, I again would find that of interest, in particular in terms of trying to think about how to solve some of the issues about developing indicators where it's a quite intractable problem, and seeing what others have done would potentially be a very useful process.
Okay, yeah, that's great advice as well. Yeah, I think that is a really important next step for the BIP partnership as well, to sort of use the partnership and the website as a, you know, for lack of a better word, clearinghouse in terms of being able to highlight and allow different countries and regions expose sort of their own work, methodologies, and solutions, so that we can sort of accelerate that technology transfer. Because you're absolutely right, and I very much believe in this, simply because in my other my night job, which is running this global network, we're doing that through biodiversity observations by sharing tools for observation collection and analysis in the same way. So I'll bring that. I'll definitely bring that to the BIP, because I absolutely agree, and I think it's worth stating that we've been working with these global indicator and data providers simply because it's kind of the layer, it's a layer of less complexity, as you just said. So it's sort of the easiest, lowest hanging fruit. But it's not to say that we think that the global data sets are the end all be all. And then we very much recognize that national data sets, by their very nature, are incredibly important, and in many cases, the most important. So we're very interested in how we can sort of take that next step. Of course, technologically, it gets much more complex, especially around on-the-fly generation of time series trends, but it's certainly something we'd like to explore.
Well, I'd certainly be happy to follow that up offline.
Great. Yeah. Okay. Excellent, James. Yeah, send me an email. I think you see it on the screen, or you did. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you, James. Thanks a lot. And I think we have one more hand raised. Actually, Sharik who asked this question for Afghanistan, raised his hand. So Sharik, I'm not sure you raised it for the same question or not, but I'm going to activate your microphone in case you have another question. Can you hear us?
Yeah, Marion, first of all, thank you so much for this wonderful webinar. Thank you, Mike, as well, for the wonderful presentation. And my question, I was looking at this KBA. Let me open that. Where is my website? Yeah, so this KBA, mean percentage of KBA area covered by protected areas, when I look at the graph, it shows like for 2009, it shows like for 6.14% mean of KBA, the same, and it stays constant until 2018. So my assumption is like, first of all, maybe this data comes from the fact that Afghanistan announced its first national park back in 2009, and then in 2014 it announced another, the second national park of Wakhan. But this percentage stayed constant over the years. So what I was really interested to know is like if that data is not updated here, while it has stayed constant, and generally then I was afraid if I was able like to use this graph into in my sixth national report.
Yeah, okay, great question. So it's hard for me to know exactly what's going on there, and I'll definitely bring this, your comment of this problem to BirdLife, who sort of maintains the lead on the indicator itself. There's either two, I think there's only two possible explanations there. One is that the WDPA, or the World Database of Protected Areas, is not fully up to date on the overall protected area coverage in Afghanistan, or the additional protected areas that have been announced in Afghanistan in recent years don't actually cover identified key biodiversity areas. I'm not saying that that is the case, but that would be another possible explanation for why you didn't see an increase in protected area coverage of KBAs if those new protected areas were outside of the KBAs.
Yeah, exactly. That's I think that's also my assumption that this is not updated because I've been going through all these wonderful surveys in the very recent years by WCS in Afghanistan, especially in the key protected areas that they have covered surveys of different wild species. Yeah, so. So yeah, I mean, if I'm assured with other, I mean, indicators in the dashboard, so it would be very nice to use, and it's very handy, like to use these graphs and charts in the 6th national report. But overall, I mean, in Afghanistan, my struggle so far has been like to meet in this report, to meet the requirements of the Afghan government, like what are the key, I mean, messages or areas that the Afghan government would like to present in the 6th national report, and at the same time the other requirements by the CBD to meet those requirements, like measuring the effectiveness of the Afghanistan targets, like those 11 targets, and against the Aichi biodiversity targets. So that has been like the key challenge for me in Afghanistan, but hopefully we will get to some extent like these two requirements, both by the international community like CBD, the convention, and as well as the Afghan government. You see, like in Afghanistan, we have the government has different priorities in terms of like and as well as challenges. There is the issue of institutional capacities. There is the issue of lack of adequate security in some areas for protection and conservation of biodiversity, as well as issues of a lack of adequate financial resources. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so well, what I'll do on that particular, there's two things that jump to mind. One is I want to raise this with BirdLife and flag this potential issue. The other thing I think that kind of brings to mind is that we really need to include on the BIP dashboard a feedback button. So when experts, national experts such as yourself, are on the BIP dashboard and you see some potential discrepancies with some of the indicators, if we had a button that you could press where you could just quickly write down and send to us what you see as a potential issue, that would be helpful, because then we could direct that to the particular indicator provider if there's been some error in calculation or the data set's not up to date, for instance.
Yeah, exactly. That would be great. I think it will provide continuous interactions between those who are using the data and those who are, like you guys, who are updating the data sets and information in the dashboard. That would be nice.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks for flagging that. I'll send that to BirdLife, but I'll also put it on our to-do list with the development team to add a feedback button.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharik, again for that question. So far, I'm not seeing any other questions. Maybe I'm going to give 30 seconds for the participants to take that chance and send us your questions, or raise your hand if you have any. And if not, then I may just turn over to Mike for any concluding remarks. Mike, do you have anything you'd like to share as a final word for this session?
Sure. Oh, thanks again, Marian, for facilitating the webinar. Much appreciated, and Diego for in the background for making sure that technical aspects run smoothly. And thanks to everyone that joined. I guess the final thing is that, again, we really encourage and welcome all of you to contact us if you have specific needs or questions. We're here to help. And also we encourage you to tell your colleagues about this platform and also about the UN Biodiversity Lab. We need to work through all of you and your connections just to spread the word that these tools are available. And the final third thing I would mention is that the BIP Secretariat at the UN Environment World Conservation Monitoring Center can also work directly with the country to help with making available certain indicators. So even as that question from Sharif around Afghanistan and its particular needs, there's also some resources and some capacity there to also have an interaction directly to pull up some existing data. So there's many different ways that you can engage with us. We're very, very keen on that because this call itself has been incredibly valuable for me. Just through the questions you're asking, it really gives me a sense of what's important to you and what sort of things we need to do to continually improve it. So thanks again.
Great, thanks, Mike, and thank you for emphasizing the fact that we provide support to countries and platforms, but if the countries and the people do not use it, then it's obviously useless. So we rely heavily on you for feedback for any of the platform we have been provided so far. So I'm gonna conclude the webinar with this, and by of course thanking you, Mike, and thank you, Katherine, for this great session, and thanking all the participants for the very detailed and precise question. It's very helpful. As I was mentioning at the beginning of the webinar, we will upload the recording of that session on the YouTube channel, as we do for every session of webinars, and the presentation will be shared on the NBSAP forum. I also want to say again, I see a few colleagues that now we know. I see you on the list of participants. We're having a Spanish-speaking session at 11 a.m. New York time, which is approximately in 1 hour and 40 minutes. And I also see colleagues speaking French here. And just so you know, we have another session in French on Thursday, 7 February, same time at 8 a.m. New York time. So with that, I thank you all. Thank you to speakers. Thanks, Diego, for the backup and help on technical aspect. And I wish you all to have a great day, or depending on where you are in the world, a great evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.